raise and distribute more sales tax through Measure T than we get back. So there's been a conversation about return to source and having that more equitable. That discussion is happening. We're advocating for that. Obviously, we would like to have more money back in our coffers. We've given direction to do more polling to see how this would shake out. It would not be a new tax. It would be an extension of the same Measure T tax, but maybe more flexibility in using those funds so that we can help deliver some of these projects locally. But more to come on that. I've asked our city clerk to send you the slideshow, the presentation. It's rather lengthy. Bear with me. Go through it and find what you think is interesting. But the presentation went very quickly. So that's it for me. I know there's a couple of bicycle events coming up in September, and others may have the exact names of those events and the times of those events. I personally don't have that in front of me, but if one of our staff members can report on that, that would be very helpful. I think those are coming up right in the next week or two. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Doring. I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you, Mayor Ellsworth. I do have a report to make. I wanted to let everyone know that the first community workshop on the draft groundwater sustainability plan for the Napa Valley Subbasin is coming up in Napa on September 22nd. I want to say that's at 6 p.m. Let me see. Yes, it's from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at Napa Valley College. I'll get some information to staff so that hopefully that can be distributed with other announcements from the city. My understanding is that there was a date selected for a workshop in St. Helena on the 28th, but that there's been some difficulty arranging for a venue, and I'm honestly not sure of the status on that, but I do know that the meeting in Napa is set again on September 22nd. I want to encourage everyone with an interest in the groundwater sustainability plan and the work of ensuring that we continue to have healthy aquifer. Everyone is interested in that. Really should try to find an opportunity to attend one of these community workshops. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm seeing, thank you, Councilmember Hardy. I'm seeing our city manager and then Council Member Chateau.
I have an answer to that question. On the second meeting, there was consideration for the 28th, but it conflicted with our next council meeting. So that second workshop has been rescheduled for Wednesday, September 29th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at the Upper Napa Valley campus in St. Helena for the groundwater sustainability workshop.
Very good. Thank you. And Councilmember Chateau.
I just really wanted to quickly mention the Water Advisory Board meeting that we had, because we handled the leaks applications for the first time, and the board, all of us agreed to waive the penalties for the leaks that came before us. We all made similar comments on that board of wanting people to demonstrate a good faith effort, and we saw the details of the expense that they went through and the timeline for when they worked to fix the leaks. And that's what we want to do, because the goal is to conserve water, and we don't want to penalize people for the extra money that happens because of a leak. And we could see over and over again, all these different cases, how easy it is to have a leak and how much people have to be on it now and the expense they go through. So I just wanted that. And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Very good. Thank you. And so I have a few things to get through. I'll go pretty quickly here. Again, wanting to let folks know we've got to stay in phase 2 and not move into phase 3 in our water conservation efforts. Phase 2 is a manageable phase. Phase 3 becomes very difficult. So the more we conserve now, the better we're going to be. So please look to all measures in terms of water conservation, and we'll work through this together. emergency prep issues, continue looking at your family plan, go bags, et cetera, as we are in fire season, and we want to have everybody keep that at top of mind. We continue having dialogue with the county and staying looped in with the county and other jurisdictions on COVID issues. So as those come forward, we as a city are fully informed and engaged, and will relay any information needed on that. On the Groundwater Sustainability Advisory Committee, as Councilmember Hardy mentioned, that is moving forward. I want to give a shout out to Councilmember Hardy and his really focused work on those efforts, really extraordinary. So thank you. As we look at the NVTA and Measure T, that was a large meeting with a lot of information. And as Vice Mayor Doring said, very important, this tax, this measure for making sure that our transportation dollars and for paving and moving forward on transportation projects is really critical. So our staying engaged on that is very important. I want to talk briefly about September 16th. Coming up is Mexican Independence Day, and the St. Helena Multicultural Group is going to do a virtual celebration live on Facebook. That'll be at the St. Helena Community Multicultural Group Thursday, September 16th at 6:30 p.m. That will include a flag raising at on our ceremonial pole in front of the old City Hall in Lyman Park. That'll be on Thursday, and that item will be in our consent calendar. And so we want to celebrate that day, September 16th, Mexican Independence Day. On our inclusivity efforts, I was sent this week by a community member. This is a LGBTQ plus allies sticker, flag, and symbol. I'll be learning more about this in the coming weeks, but this was sent to me and I thought was a really interesting concept. And then one last thing is on September 26th is a drive and bike electric day at Napa Valley College in Napa from 1 to 4 p.m. So that touches on our climate goals. So that's a drive and bike electric day, Napa College, September 26th, 1 to 4 p.m. So those are the main or some of the things that I've been looking at. And we'll now move to our sections of presentations and public recognitions. And as we mentioned, the proclamation for the Napa County Latino Heritage Month will be before the presentation on Hunter. And I just have to move to a new device here to bring that one up, if you'll just bear with me. And I believe on the line we have Rosora Segura, who is on our planning commission, but is also part of the St. Helena Multicultural Committee. And I don't know if we can promote her to the panel.
She just got promoted.
Okay, very good. So let me bring up this proclamation. Rosora, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you very much for being on. So this is the City of St. Helena proclamation recognizing Napa County Latino Heritage Month, September 15th through October 15th, 2021. Whereas in 1968, President Lyndon B. Johnson first recognized Hispanic Heritage Week, later expanded by President Reagan to 1 month, and each successive United States president has continued this tradition of declaring September 15th through October 15th to be National Hispanic Heritage Month, and who has called upon the people of our country to observe this month with appropriate respect, ceremonies, and activities. And whereas Napa County and the City of St. Helena has a long history of welcoming immigrants and is home to a growing multi-ethnic and multicultural Latino population, including citizens originating from Mexico, the Caribbean, Central and South America, all of whom are welcome and very much appreciated. And whereas in 2014, the Latino population became the largest ethnic group in California in Napa County and the city of St. Helena, the Latino population grew by 50% in the past 10 years. And whereas the diverse Latino population of the city of St. Helena and Napa County make a significant economic contribution and have other profound positive influences on our community through their strong commitment to family, faith, education, hard work, culture, and service. And whereas the city of St. Helena and Napa County, which thrives on the diversity and ingenuity of all our people, also depends on the continued support and success of our diverse Latino population. We will continue to be enriched by the transcultural contributions of our Latino friends and neighbors for many decades to come. And we will continue to make efforts to create an inclusive environment where we can all thrive. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Jeff Ellsworth, Mayor of the City of St. Helena, and the City Council members of the City of St. Helena do hereby proclaim September 15th through October 15th, 2021 as Napa County Latino Heritage Month in the City of St. Helena. In witness, I do hereby set my hand and cause the seal of the City of St. Helena to be affixed this 14th day of September, 2021. And I see Rosara, and do you have a few words in accepting this proclamation?
I was here for the next item on the agenda, but this is great. This is wonderful. You know, to be recognized as a community, as part of the community, it's great. Thank you to the City Council, to you for this great proclamation. And I will make sure that other members of the community hear about this. You know, they couldn't be here for one reason or another, but thank you very much. We're very proud to be a part of you, and you a part of us. And so we are a community all together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rosara. And we'll move now with that to our next presentation. And this is going to be our Hunter Subdivision informational presentation. And I have a few comments to read before that as we get into that. Thank you. I'm having a little technical issue with my devices here. So here we go. Thanks for your patience here. Maya, do you want to begin taking us into this while this comes up for me?
Yeah, certainly. First, I want to thank the council for this opportunity for the applicant and staff to share about the project. It's, as you may know, the project originally came forward in 2010 with an application for a subdivision, and there's been some stops and starts, as we know, over the years, and my predecessors have tried to navigate it, you know, to getting to a hearing, and I'm happy to say that we've made some significant progress on both the map corrections and the EIR. This past year, we'll be talking about the next steps in the presentation. And Mayor, if you wanted me to do some of the opening comments about kind of what to expect, I'm happy to share that as well, if you'd like me to do that.
Thanks. I got my device working here. Let me just run through these, and then I'll put it back to you to cover anything that I might have missed.
Perfect.
So we just want to make the public aware about what this meeting is about. And first of all, it's not a public hearing with any action that's going to be taken tonight. This is just an informational presentation. The EIR for this project has not been released. Therefore, there will be no discussion regarding the environmental impact conclusions of the project, as that EIR has not been released. Staff will be outlining the next steps of the project, and when there will be additional opportunities for public comment prior to any action taken by the city. And if you do wish to speak, we'll have a public comment period on this item, and we'll have our section at the end of the presentation for that public comment. So with that, Maya, I'll give it back to you to lead us in.
Sure, thank you very much. So we'll have a two-part presentation led starting with the applicant and then wrapped up by city staff. But I think I'll start off with just an introduction. So I'm the planning and building director for the city. The applicant tonight will be presenting is VanZutphen, and he has been navigating this for the past few years with the city. And then the other co-lead on the project side for the city I'd like to introduce is Eric Norris. He is a principal planner with Interwest, and he has been hired to act as the city's project manager. So he will be also co-hosting the presentation at the end when it's staff's time to run the presentation. So with no further ado, we will keep our presentation to 15 minutes or less, and I'll hand this over to Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. Good evening, Mayor, council members. I'm not, Eric, are you able to perhaps drive the presentation?
Oh, I think Cindy has the presentation.
Okay. We do have some slides we can go through. I promise I will be extremely brief to allow for more time at the end for questions. I know you have a long agenda this evening. So we have here, just to kind of give you a little history. We put the application in 2010 and have been working through it for several years. Not much has changed. What we have are we're at the minimum zoning and general plan density, which is 5.1 acres or 5.1 units per acre. We've got 51 lots that are, you can see spread out here. You have Adams Street that will come through and connect with Star Avenue. We've created a parcel B that you can see kind of towards the right-hand side. That's where the existing ag well is located. And so we've created a little parcel for that to connect in. And then there is a remainder parcel 52, which we look to do workforce and affordable housing on 25 units there. Eric, can we go, or Cindy, can we go to the next slide? This is a kind of shows a good aerial of where we're located here, just north of the Hunts Grove Apartments. This was an area where the levee was put in. You can see how it's going to connect through Adams Street into Star, goes through the project, and gives you a good idea of where it is, location to all the other parts of town there. This parcel is 16.9 acres. It's been general planned, medium density residential, and zoned that way as well. Since 1974-ish or so. You can put between 87 and 270 units, and we've gone with the minimum of 87 units, with 51 units that are similar to the Meadow Creek subdivision, which is just to the south, very similar in size and scope, with an additional 25 workforce affordable housing and 11 accessory dwelling units to get to the minimum number required by the zoning and the general plan. Can we do the next slide, Cindy? Oh, yeah, and so that's really what I was saying there. The lots sizes for the homes will be between 7,000 and 12,000 square feet. With the majority of them being in the 7,000 to 8,000 square foot range. Minimum lot depths of 75 feet, widths of 70 feet, with 20-foot fronts and backs and 10-foot side setbacks. So very gracious streetscape and density as you go along the streets. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, this shows you some kind of how the trees would go together. You can see lot 52 there on the left-hand side. That's where the workforce housing will go. The remainder of the lots you can see are spread throughout, with the cul-de-sac kind of down at the bottom. There's a stormwater retention that was put in, easements for sewer and water. And this is designed to fulfill the general planning of connecting Adams and Star. Next slide, please. So we're using we just had the well tested, and it's turned out to be quite a prolific well. We did a 24-hour test, and it is producing. There was no drawdown at all throughout the test. So we're looking to have that water be used for all the irrigation and all the exterior water needs. We'll connect into the St. Helena water for the domestic use, and as well the storm drain system and the wastewater system of the city. Next slide, please. We're going to have a variety of housing types, from the granny units, the accessory dwelling units, to the different housing types for all different members of the community, for multifamily, and also the single family homes. Next slide, please. Oh, this is a tentative map, and it's been going for a while. So we're just trying to get the map subdivided. In the future, we will be doing other design review that Eric will cover the different processes that we have to go through in moving forward. But here is another kind of a breakdown of the 87 units. We're going to have 51 markets, 11 ADUs, 25 affordables, and the plan is to build it all at once. Have the affordable units be built at the same time as the market units, and all built as one phase concurrently. This slide shows some of the architectural design concepts that we're looking at doing. The last project I did in town was Meadow Creek, and you can see most of you may be familiar with that project and that architecture. So we're taking that and making it more of a traditional, old farmhouses with front porches, creating community space on the front side, and the vineyard trail will connect through Star and Adams, and so we're creating nice front porches where people can come, create more of a sense of a community as you go through the subdivision. So these are some of the design and architectural ideas that we have that we're looking at moving forward. And so just a very rough timeline. Maya did go over this, but we had our application in 2010. In 2011, it was deemed complete, and we've been working through the CEQA process since then.
I can take it from here. Thank you.
Okay.
These next couple of slides that staff's going to be talking about just help the council, the public understand, from where we are today, what is the look ahead? And actually, could you go back? I wanted to speak to some of the changes that have actually been made. Thank you. So the EIR this past year, there has actually been a lot of updates to the document, including we had to update the general plan policy consistency analysis. The EIR traffic analysis needed to be updated to convert to a VMT analysis to be in accordance with the new state laws on traffic methodology. And then on the infrastructure side, we've updated all the baseline on the water supply, as well as what was just earlier mentioned. We've incorporated the results of the well test into the hydrology section of the document. So that's just a broad brush of some of the updates that have happened both recently and also in the past 12 months to the document. And then on the tentative map part, we've made some additional refinements. Mr. Norris has worked very diligently with the applicant's engineering team to make sure that the lots are in conformance with the standards. I want to commend him for his extremely good eye for detail. And I think it looks very accurately correct. Next slide, please. And so as what was highlighted on this slide, it's just essentially to show that the project, did initially file in 2010 and where we are today, what are some of the significant milestones. And as you'll see on the next slide down, or the next, after 2010, there was the application that was deemed complete in 2011. There was a CEQA process that started with an initial study and NOP in 2011 through 2016. There was a new NOP that was worked on in 2017, 2018. And so we now have, we're now at the point where we have all the documentation of the EIR complete, and we're just fine tuning it to assemble it to get it for release, which we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide, please. And I'm going to actually hand this over to Mr. Norris, the project manager, to finish off our slide deck. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya, and Mayor and Council. Thank you for taking the time tonight. I want to thank the mayor, first of all, for mentioning that this is not a hearing tonight. This is just a presentation. This slide highlights the many opportunities that the public will have to comment, talk about the project, either in writing or in person. And I'll just kind of go through those from the beginning. As Maya mentioned, we're almost ready to have the draft EIR on the street. It's been a long time coming. Our tentative date is mid to end of next week. So that's going to start a 45-day public review and comment period. State agencies, other agencies as well get to comment, but the public will have 45 days within which to read that document thoroughly, comment on it with questions or comments. During that period, probably in the first week in November, and this will all be published on the city's website, there will be a meeting of the Planning Commission at which we will convene a meeting just to receive comments on the draft EIR. So we'll have a very similar presentation, just an overview of the project. And by that time, we'll be near the end of the 45-day review period. So people hopefully have had time to review that document, read it thoroughly, as we expect many people will, and come to that meeting and comment to the Planning Commission and staff. We'll be taking notes, encouraging people to write their comments down as well, but that'll be one of the opportunities. As we go through the process then, and as Mr. VanZutphen and Maya have mentioned, the item that's in front of you, or that will be in front of you soon, is the tentative subdivision map. So that's an item that goes both through the Planning Commission for a recommendation and then onto the City Council. Those are both public hearing items. So you'll see items on the agendas for the Commission and the Council to hold hearings on both the draft EIR and on the tentative subdivision map. So we put some general timing in there. The 45-day review period, again, starts next week, runs through the month of October and then into November. And then depending on the number of comments that come back, it's always a little hard to accurately predict when you're going to be in a hearing. When you're dealing with an environmental impact report, you never know quite how many comments are going to come in and how long that will take to respond to. But we are looking at winter of, let's say, 2021 into 2022 to be in a hearing mode and actually be in front of the Commission and Council. Next slide, please. Now, looking forward and assuming that this process is completed and a map is approved, we haven't gotten there yet, there are some future entitlements that would be required before anything could get built. All they're asking for right now is the ability to subdivide that property. So the applicant mentioned the provision of affordable housing. That would be subject to an affordable housing agreement. That's a City Council action to review and approve that. He mentioned the design of the homes. So they will need to bring in detailed designs of exactly what they propose to build here. That goes to the Planning Commission for approval. There's also a requirement for a conditional use permit for the multifamily component of the project. That is also a planning commission item. So all of these will probably be running through the process around the same time. We don't even want to put a date on that because we want to finish this first process and then move into the second phase here. And all of these, again, are going to be the subjects of public hearings at either the planning commission or the council, depending on who the acting body is. So I hope that gives you an overview of where we are. Certainly for anybody who's listening tonight, the many opportunities that there will be to comment on the project, both formally in writing and just in testimony at a hearing like this. And we do look forward to receiving all the comments and being in a hearing mode. So Maya, I'll turn it back to you. Mayor and Council, if you have any questions that I can answer, I'll be happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both for assisting with the presentation, and I'll bring it back to the mayor to open it up for questions.
Very good. I'll open it to the council for questions in just a moment, and then to the public. I had one question that had come up over time, was the location near the levee. Is that addressed in the EIR?
Mayor, yes, it is. There's a very detailed discussion of flooding and hydrology in that document. So yes, it is.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And so I'm going to put it to the council at this point to see if there are any additional questions or input here. And I am seeing no hands. So with that, I will move to our city clerk and see if we have any input or comments from the public.
I'm seeing no public comment. Oh, we do have a public comment. Just one moment. Nancy, you can unmute yourself and address the council.
Good evening, council and everybody. I'm going to guess that in your reports concerning the levy, reports are going to establish that that levy is secure and it's never going to be a problem. However, if against all odds that levy should ever fail and there is subsequent loss of property or even worse, loss of life, who is going to be responsible for that?
Ms. Durbin, are you directing that question?
To the presenter, either of the people representing the project or the city attorney. I'm just curious. Levies are never expected to fail, but they fail. And if this one fails and there are people living there, who's going to be responsible when the lawsuits start flying?
So with that, I'll put this to our city attorney to figure out how to address this this question. And this may not be the time for a response, but certainly see where to go with a question like that.
Well, with all due respect, I don't think it's a particularly sophisticated question. If you have a housing development built next to a levee and the levee fails, is the city responsible for allowing the development to be built there? Or do the developers take the responsibility by putting it in a potentially risky location?
So, Mayor, I'm happy to respond to that, although I don't really think I can answer the question. The problem really is that, you know, a situation like that is going to have a lot of specific facts that relate to why the levee broke and what were the circumstances that led to whatever happened. And just without specific facts, it's pretty much impossible to answer a question like that at this point. I think who would be responsible for anything that happened would very much depend on, you know, on factors that would be based on whatever specific facts were at hand at that time. So I'm sorry, I can't give a more specific answer, but just in kind of the without that detail, it's really impossible to give a speculative answer.
Well, may I then refine my question? Is there any scenario whatsoever in which the city could be deemed the responsible party.
Mayor,
Any
I'd prefer not.
scenario.
Yeah,
I don't really think this is a setting to get in the back and
Yeah.
forth. I mean,
So
it's up
what
to
I
you
would
on this,
suggest-
Mayor, but you know,
yes,
I'm
I
not
concur.
really interested in responding to speculative questions about potential city liability in this context.
Yeah, so what I'll ask for the caller is if they want to craft their question into a written question and submit it, it can be looked at that way. But I think right here, right now is not the time to get into an in-depth answer on that. So are there any more comments, Ms. Durbin, before the period, the 4-minute period here? Oh, I'm seeing perhaps she dropped off the call. Okay, so with that,
We have an additional public comment.
okay, very good.
Carlotta, you're able to unmute yourself and address the council.
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation, and I really appreciate the slide that provided the information on opportunities for public comment. The Napa County Bicycle Coalition is looking forward to providing comment and working with the applicant on discussing these comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment?
There is no other public comment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the council. Is there any additional comment or question from council at this time? And I'm seeing no hands. So with that, then I'll say thank you very much for the presentation. And as this moves forward and goes into its process, there'll be opportunity for our community to participate as it has been laid out here. And we appreciate your time and the slides that really helped us understand the process and the project. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Very good. So with that, we will move on now to our staff briefing. This is 8.1, and this was going to be an update on the wastewater treatment plant upgrade project. And this is our Public Works Director, Mr. Rincon Ibarra.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor. I think I jumped the gun earlier when I provided the dates, but nonetheless, I'll repeat them for clarity. So before you, I think in your consent calendar, you have a financial item for consideration of a resolution to accept a bank proposal for interim financing for this project. If it's accepted tonight, then we'll move into bidding the project. So we'll advertise the project in 2 days. We'll have various things to go through. We'll have the bids due on October 28th. We will review the bids for 2 weeks, and then thereafter we will make a decision and bring it back to council at that point. We're looking at maybe first meeting in December to bring a construction contract to council. And it depends also how we, if we could do this around Thanksgiving, but I know these meetings are typically canceled. Hopefully we're looking to issue a notice to proceed to the contractor by January of 22. So the start of the year, we'll be issuing the notice to proceed for the contractor to initiate construction at the site.
Very good. Thank you. I'm seeing Councilmember Hall with a hand up.
Thank you. I don't know if we were going to have an opportunity to stop on this item on the consent calendar, but most likely, I imagine not. I just had one quick question for Mr. Rincon Ibarra. Are you comfortable with the Bank of the West draw schedule the way it's laid out? Will that allow you and your subs to work effectively?
My understanding is that it is a 3-year effort for interim financing, and the cash flow should be sufficient to meet the demands of the project.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other council comments at this point? Seeing none, well, thank you again, and really appreciate the efforts on this. It's a big step forward for our community, so thank you. Okay, we'll move now to our consent items, our consent calendar, I had a request today to pull item 9.12. And so that will be pulled. I'll read through if there are any additional items to be pulled. Somebody can put up their hand to let me know or let our city clerk know. So we'll go through 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, 9.4, 9.5, 9.6, 9.7, 9.8, 9.9, 9.10, 9.11, and we've pulled 9.12. So seeing nothing pulled, I'll ask for a motion to pass the consent calendar with the exception of 9.12.
So moved.
And a second, please.
Second.
And our roll call.
Councilmember Hall,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Chateau,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. And so item 9.12 is consideration of proposal approval of a resolution approving a professional services agreement with Fairbank, Maslin, Maullin, Metz, and Associates, FM3 Research in an amount not to exceed $32,175 for opinion research services. And I believe one of our attendees on the meeting is here who asked for it to be pulled, Miss Carlota Sanato. And our city clerk, could you bring her on to get her comment input on this item, please?
Hi, I think I'm unmuted. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. This is Carlota Sinato, Program Manager with the Napa County Bicycle Coalition. Thank you for pulling this item. I just wanted to really quickly address some of the content that will be included in this work. The staff report from the June 8th meeting, when this topic was discussed, listed streets as one of the infrastructure categories, but only discussed streets in the context of PCI. And while PCI is an important indicator of street maintenance, it is primarily vehicle focused. As St. Helena has several goals around climate, community health, and active transportation accessibility, the Napa County Bicycle Coalition believes that active transportation must be considered in this infrastructure evaluation. So we would like to request that the research that is going to be performed includes an evaluation of public opinion regarding priorities around two key topics. The first being building out the network of bicycle and pedestrian facilities and maintaining those facilities. And the second, which is sort of a subcategory of first, is providing safe routes to school infrastructure for children and maintaining that infrastructure in St. Helena, including safer crosswalks, sidewalks, which is not included in PCI, and separated pathways. So we're happy to discuss this further with the city and with the FM3 research team. Thank you for taking my comment.
Thank you. Is there any additional public comments? Okay.
There is none.
Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council. I'm certainly supportive of including those aspects. I think that's a place we've all been talking about moving forward here with. So I'll look to the city manager in terms of how we might incorporate something like that if there's council support.
I'm supportive of that. It came up conversation for getting a percentage of money from.
I think the city manager needed to say something or wanted to say something before we started. Thanks.
I'm prepared to just say that we're really looking for a community-supported strategy to address the significant infrastructure challenges that we have that are outlined in the staff report. We're really building on several consecutive studies now that document some significant, to the scale of $60+ million of backlog and underinvestment over decades. So it's not just something in the last couple of years, it's decades of investment that are needed to catch up on. And we do have some nearer term operational challenges, but the feedback on the bikes and the safe routes to school infrastructure is helpful as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Chateau?
Thank you. I'll just pivot and say that I'm also supportive. We got public comment about including a question about housing and looking for funding for that. And I'm supportive of also including that in the data collection.
As am I, as I am as well on the housing and the active transportation aspects. So with that,
Well, I have a question, I guess, Mr. Mayor. What is the process, city manager, in terms of working with the pollster to fine tune the questions? There'll be more process other than this right here, right?
There will be, and I think it's going to be helpful to have a stakeholder group of council members. So I'll be working more with Mr. Metz, the project manager, overseeing the FM3 research, to work on a process that will include a group of stakeholders, which will include hopefully a subgroup of council members as well. So we anticipate getting started pretty quickly. I anticipate we can be back discussing that process in the next couple of weeks, within a meeting or two.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you. And Councilmember Hardy?
I think my question's been answered. Thank you, Mayor.
Very good. Thank you. So with no additional council input or comment at this point, I'd look for a motion on item 9.12.
I move approval of item 9.12.
Second.
Councilmember Chateau,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doreen,
Yes.
Councilmember Hardy,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Mayor Eldred.
Yes. Okay, we'll now move into our public hearings. This is item 10.1, and it's consideration and proposed approval of a resolution approving the annexation of territory into the St. Helena Municipal Sewer District Number 1, MSD Annexation Number 140, 1386 Community Drive, St. Helena, 94574, APN 009-432-025. And this is Martin Beltran, and is he here to present this evening? Oh, I'm seeing Councilmember Chateau with a
Thank you,
hand.
Mayor. I'm going to recuse myself. I believe this is the one I did before because my property is close to the HOA. It falls within that 500 feet.
Very good. We'll have the city clerk notify you when we're back ready for you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Beltran, are you with us? I'm seeing.
Yes, I am. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. As part of the sewer annexation process, this item was first brought to City Council on July 27th, in which a resolution was adopted ordering tonight's public hearing. Per our municipal code sections 13.020.040 and 13.020.070, the property owner is required to annex into the city's municipal sewer district, pay all annexation, connection, and impact fees. The applicant has completed this step, and if council approves the attached resolution, allowing the property at 1386 Community Drive to be annexed into the city's sewer system following tonight's hearing, city staff will then process the annexation with the county and state. I don't believe the applicant is present tonight, but if there are any questions, staff is available to answer any questions that may be presented tonight. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Are there any initial comments or input questions from council? I am seeing none. So we'll move it to our attendees and see if there's any public comment.
There is no public comment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we'll bring it back to the council. I'll look for any additional public or council comment or input. I'm seeing our city attorney with a hand up. Mr. Walsh.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for the sake of technical accuracy, I believe this was a public hearing. And so if you could just open and close the public hearing rather than just taking public comment.
Oh, okay. So we'll now open the public hearing and see if there's any input on the public hearing.
There is no public comment.
Okay, we'll bring it back. We'll close the public hearing. We'll bring it back to the council. See if there's any additional comment or question from the council. And seeing none, I will then ask for a motion on this item.
I move that we approve a resolution of the City Council of the City of St. Helena to approve the annexation of territory known as 1386 Community Drive, St. Helena, California 94574, assessors parcel number 009-432-025 into the St. Helena Municipal Sewer District number 1, MSD annexation number 140.
Second.
Councilmember Hardy,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Could you repeat that motion? Yes.
I could.
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to, if you just stand by one moment, I'm going to ask Councilmember Chateau to rejoin us.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
She is rejoining.
Okay, very good. Okay,
Really quick.
there we are. So we've got everybody back here. So we're going to move forward now. Item 11.1 has been taken off the agenda tonight, and we've moved 11.3 up. And so we'll go to 11.3 now, and this is our revenue forecast and discussion and direction regarding the fiscal year 2021-22 add back considerations and full-time fire department cost analysis. And this is prepared by April Metz, Dr. Metz, our Administrative Services Director.
Great, thank you very much. I will be sharing my screen, and City Manager Presswitch and I will be tag teaming this presentation. So I just want a thumbs up. Everyone can see my screen, okay? Okay, thank you, Paul. So I wanted to start out where we think we're going to end up at the end of fiscal year 2021. So that fiscal year did end on June 30th, and we are still in the process of doing all of our end of year transactions and postings. But when we adopted the fiscal year 22 budget, we did anticipate that our ending fund balance for fiscal year 21 would be $6.16 million, or a 34% net position. Since that time, we do have the actual June 2020 sales tax numbers. We also have some additional months worth of data for our TOT, our transient occupancy tax. And then we also, as mentioned in the staff report, we had also received our first stimulus package payment that gets applied back to fiscal year 2021. Initially, we anticipated that each payment would be $575,000. However, once we actually received the first payment, it was $154,000 higher than that. So it was actually $729,000. So with that new information that we have, we did update our projections as of September 9th. So we do believe our estimated net position for the general fund will be $6.66 million, or 39% reserve. And so that is above council's adopted policy of a 30% reserve level. So the next slide, we are looking at our fiscal year 21-22. So now we're moving into the current fiscal year, which started on June 1st and runs, or July 1st and runs through June 30th. So again, when we adopted the budget, when council adopted the budget on June 22nd, you'll see I'm looking at the three main drivers of our general fund revenue, which is our property tax, our sales tax, and our transient occupancy tax, which usually accounts for anywhere between 86 and 90% of our general fund revenues. So we adopted our budget at a $15,675,690 is what we estimated it would be. Since this time, we did get notification that our property tax, what we put in the budget was a 4% escalator. We received the information from the county in mid-August, and the escalator is actually only 3.4%. So we are looking at a decrease from our initial projections of property tax of about $31,000. We did receive notification just last week that the city will be receiving the excess ERAF funds. The city does not budget for these funds, and we do consider them to be one-time only revenues. And the reason for that is because a couple different reasons. The amount can fluctuate, everything from under $200,000. We've seen it as high as about $500,000, $550,000 when I've looked over the years to see what we've received. And because it is unpredictable, there is also some chance that the state could take away that funding mechanism for the city. And so because of that, we are very cautious, and we do consider that one-time revenue. The good news is we did find out that we are going to be receiving $443,744. Our sales tax projections, we did get some updated projections from Avenue Analytics. And the city does budget for the most conservative, or the least likely and the very most conservative for sales tax, which is at $4.929 million. We did get revised estimates from Avenue, and what they did is they did downgrade their most likely scenario, and their most likely scenario is it's about $100,000 higher than what we budgeted. So for that reason, we decided we're just going to keep it as what we budgeted, knowing it's someplace between what we consider the least likely and the most conservative and what Avenue's considering as their most likely scenario. TOT, we did receive some very positive news from our hotels out there, and the hotels, the short-term rentals, the bed and breakfast that do collect TOT on behalf of the city. And so based on that information, we are updating our projections. So instead of being 3.13 million, we're actually updating it to 3.366 million. So that is an increase of $235,000. And then additionally, you'll see this bump up of other revenue of $154,864. That is taking into account the second payment for the federal stimulus funds. And so the first payment is being booked back to fiscal year 21. The second payment, we are hoping that we will be able to realize it in fiscal year 22. We do have one caveat on that, is the way that the legislation was written is that we will receive our second payment no sooner than 12 months after we received our first payment. Our first payment we received on July 10th. So that means we can receive the second payment no sooner than July 10th, 2022. In order for us to be able to book those in the current year, in the fiscal year 22 revenues, we do have to receive those funds by August 30th. We don't have any indication that we won't receive it by then, but I just want to put that caveat out there that it's possible it could be a little bit after that time period. So out of the additional revenue that we're looking at an additional $802,000 for this fiscal year. And also note, out of all of the revenues in here between property tax, sales tax, excess ERAF, TOT, and then the other funds, and this also includes the full payment for the federal relief package for fiscal year 22, we're looking at 1.173 million that is actually considered one-time revenues, which does account for 7% of the total revenue. So what this does to our estimated fiscal year 22 net position, when we adopted the budget on June 22nd, we were looking at a $6.2 million estimated net position, which is 40%, which again is above the council's directed goal of 30%. The new updated numbers as of September 9th is 7.5 million or 48%. So what this does is it does give the council about an 18% leeway over what their adopted budget is, or their adopted policy. So the recommendation that we had made in the staff report is that if there is additional use of reserves to fund certain aspirations of the city council, that we don't take the reserves lower than 35%, just because we are still in a very volatile environment with COVID. We've seen the trends in COVID where there was a big spike last November, and then that led to a second round of government of shutdowns. So we just want to be really cautious with our spending plan for fiscal year 22 and beyond. Also knowing that the trends that we've been seeing, as well as a lot of the state dialogue, is that it's going to take about 3 years total to get out of the current downfall of our revenues that we've been experiencing. Another recommendation is to only utilize about $200,000 for ongoing expenses. So that can equate directly to the additional TOT funds that we're anticipating, where that's going to be on. It should go ongoing from year over year as opposed to one-time revenues, and then allocate $1.3 million for one-time revenue or for one-time expenses. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to City Manager Prestwich for the next few slides.
And just if we go back one slide to that same slide for a second, just to reemphasize this, the 1.3 million is something that we believe is available for primarily one-time expenditures, although it can be made for anything. This is council discretion. But if we used all 1.3 of these dollars for some one-time expenses, what that would do is pull the general fund reserve balance from a projected 48% down to a projected 35% at the end of the current fiscal year. Next slide. So the staff report identifies a few investments that the city manager is recommending to consider or prioritize for consideration. As you know, the staff report includes a list of all of the add-back items that we identified on June 22nd. We've added some additional considerations, many of which relate to the business recovery plan and other issues that have arisen since June 22nd. Of all of those on the list, these recommendations are made for consideration and prioritization. First, a fairly significant reserve for unanticipated expenses. In addition to experiencing a couple of severe water leaks in just the last couple of weeks, we know that we have significantly deteriorated storm drains. We had a project, an emergency project a couple of years ago that was nearly $500,000. We know that we are involved in 3 lawsuits. Those lawsuits cost money. Sometimes those lawsuits require additional expenditures. And so this is a reserve for unanticipated expenses that we would recommend strong consideration of. The next item here is Napa Valley College moving expenditures and contingency figures. We don't have all of the estimates yet, and we have not gone to bid on this project. The plans are at the Division of State Architect now. We will continue to refine that number. $80,000 for contingency and moving expenses we believe is enough, but we haven't bid out that particular portion of the work as well. But we are recommending some allocation for some one-time monies for the investment in that transition to Napa Valley College. We also know that we have significant capital projects on our plate. We have more than 30 CIP projects on the water fund alone. And because of that, today we have a single licensed engineer in the city. We have a vacant assistant public works director position that we are recruiting for, and we have a junior engineer. And every additional engineering responsibility is, we are required to send that out to a consultant. Our recommendation is that we, in work with our new public works director and city engineer, Mr. Rincon, he and I have discussed the plethora of projects, and it's his recommendation, and I share that recommendation, to invest in a public works engineering division manager to help us move these projects forward and have the capacity to help internally in managing and stewarding those projects. From an information technology perspective, we've watched a public agency in our valley experience a hacking episode recently. It's been something that we've been concerned about from time to time, for several years now, and our vendor has some enhanced security scanning strategies that we can invest in that further protect the city against some form of a malicious intent there. So we are recommending investment on an ongoing basis for that and that particular technology. And finally, as we work through the details of the Napa Valley College move, we are recognizing that some additional investments on the laserfish front, which is digitizing our records, will help us avoid some additional capital expenditures for storage. If we move these assets to the cloud, we are likely to avoid having to invest in additional capital hardware. So there's a recommended investment in some laserfish technology. We also didn't want to take away your discretion, so this is really a portion of the resources that we think are available that can be stewarded to not only advance projects, but also maintain that fragile balance between a balanced budget and our obvious need to invest in projects and initiatives. I should mention on the Public Works Engineering Division Manager position, this dollar figure represents the general fund portion of that. This position would be shared equally between the water fund, the wastewater fund, and the general fund. Next slide. So the report also includes a report back that was requested from the City Council relating to a workshop that we had related to the fire department on June 29th. And this is a similar workshop that we've had for each of the last several years. And each time over the last couple of years, and even before I arrived, the department has been going through, the fire department has been going through a bit of a transition and been calibrated differently over time as the department continues to evolve, partly based on our model, which started as a volunteer model, moved to a paid per call type of model, transitioned to a part-time model, and today is really a mix of full-time employees and part-time employees. So what our community may not know is our station, unlike a lot of cities, is only staffed 10 hours a day. And a couple of years ago, it was only staffed 5 days a week. Then we grew to 6 days a week, and during COVID, we really grew that to 7 days a week, partly because of our need to work with the shifts and separate staff. And so today we have a part-time model where we have staff in the station 7 days a week. Most days that's from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. As you can see on this, the full-time employees, we have 2 full-time firefighters. They're the gentlemen identified in red here. And then we have 2 part-time firefighters that complement the full-time firefighters on each of those daytime shifts. For 14 hours of every day, we do not have firefighters in the station. Our firefighters respond from their office or their home, and they take that call. And so what that does from a service level perspective is it adds approximately 5 minutes to the turnout time associated with getting into the engine and departing for the call. So what the council asked, and at the meeting of June 29th, and we'll talk about some of these in the coming slides, the council asked us to provide a cost estimate for the cost to transition the department to a full-time model, which would provide 24 hours of coverage per day with full-time staffing. And so the chart below the table above shows where our staffing is today. And obviously on Thursdays, the reason that Thursday is adjusted is we train as a department at night, and our fire chief is on this call and can answer any additional questions you have. But we start our staff later that day because they work to approximately 9 p.m. on Thursdays with training, with a full-time and the part-time staff together. Next slide. So 2 slides on the workshop coming from June 29th. That workshop identified that there were coverage gaps. We just talked about the Thursday mornings. Our fire chief is scheduled for 3 10-hour days per week, so he works formally Tuesday through Thursday. He is a salaried employee, so we do call him in on a lot of extra hours. He can share with you a lot of those requests that happen on Mondays and Fridays and beyond. The observation of the fire department is that our paid per call firefighters have become overextended by the increasing call volume, and we'll show a chart on that, primarily at night. And essentially our paid per call firefighters are firefighters that have other jobs that are demanding, that often are 40 or more hours a week. And the slots that we don't have coverage on today happen to occur at night. And so it's difficult to sustain this model of using part-time employees that work a full-time job or more to get up in the middle of the night, answer that call for service, and go back to their home after that call is over. Also, there's a lot of training involved in growing our drivers and our supervisors. Our firefighters don't become drivers of these apparatus for several years. I think the chief can explain the specifics, but it's approximately 5 years. Next slide. The outlook that was shared in late June is that the current staffing model is very fragile and may experience service gaps in the current fiscal year because of the fewer drivers and fewer supervisors. We've also experienced a number of our part-time staff are seeking full-time employment. And when one of those leaves that might live close to St. Helena, it often has a staffing impact on our operation, despite our continued interest in recruiting replacement talent. The concern is that as COVID-19 hiring freezes in other communities begin to lift, as the revenue comes back, our city may experience additional part-time departures of staff that are looking for full-time opportunities. The concern is that the viability of this model is not sustainable in the near future. And as a result, there are potential delays to response time and or understaffed or non-staffed engines for various calls. So we'll take a look at the call volume in just a moment. Next slide. So what we did from a costing standpoint is we, in April, I think I may be taking a part of your presentation here, right? This is an analysis which would transition the city to 3 shifts. It would be essentially 2 full-time firefighters on an A shift, a B shift, and a C shift. Each shift would be 48 hours straight, 2 days in a row, followed by 4 days off. It's called a 48-96 schedule. So every 6 days, the shifts rotate. Each shift would consist of 2 full-time firefighters and 1 part-time firefighter. That 10-hour shift, we might need some flexibility there, where one of our part-time employees, in order to not lose them, may have more flexibility in the evening. They may have more flexibility for a 24-hour shift or a 48-hour shift. So I think it's important on the part-time side to keep some flexibility intact, but this is essentially the model that we costed. We would also recommend, if we're transitioning to a full-time department, that we grow the fire chief's time from 30 hours to 40 hours, essentially to a full-time staffing to oversee the 6 full-time firefighters, and we have additional staff as well. So the total cost of that transition is approximately $370,000. Next slide. And April, I think you'll take the next 2 slides.
Yes, thank you. So this next slide, I wanted to just prepare prepare it for council and for the public to see what has happened over the years as we've gone from a truly volunteer model. I think when I came, they were paid $15 a call to now having 2 full-time firefighters as well as getting paid by the hour when they come to the station to report. So you'll see the blue line across the bottom. That is the adopted budget. And then the top line above it in orange is the actual budget. And I just wanted to show the difference between the adopted and the actual. The actual amount, the differential that you see, that's primarily strike teams. And so any of those costs above, we actually get reimbursed for those strike teams. But I wanted to at least show you, so if you're looking at budgets, you'll know that there's actually a difference. And so what we have here is our fiscal year 2022. This is our adopted budget. You can see it's right below $1.4 million. I think it's 1.3 million and some change for the adopted budget for the fire department as is. If the recommendation goes forward based off of the analysis that we did and adding approximately another $270,000, this is what it would do for the fiscal year 2022 budget. And that would be changing it from primarily being a daytime department to a 365 day of the year, 24-hour department. So someone would always be in the station. The next slide that we wanted to do a comparison of is just to see how you can see where the salaries and benefits have gone up. You can also see the increase in the call volume over the years. And this is from the fire department presentation on the 29th. And you do see there is a dip in 2020 due to COVID because more people were at home and not as many people out on the street. So that is the conclusion of the fire department. And I will definitely open it up for council if they have any questions of Chief Sorensen and also to City Manager Presswitch.
And from a next step standpoint, what we're going to do is bring you a spreadsheet that will track the conversation tonight so that we can put ideas in one column that is one-time investments and also track recurring investments that if the council would like to augment the budget appropriations in the current fiscal year. So I'll pause because you may have some questions for the fire chief as well before we start to walk through the specific discussion of potential add-back considerations.
Very good, thank you. So what we'll do is we'll have some council input and comments and then open it to public comment. But we'll start, I'm seeing Councilmember Chateau.
Thank you. I have a question. Since this is over the 200,000 that we have extra for ongoing expenses, what is the thinking about where this money will come from?
I think given the scale of the general fund balance and the possibility, the probability, when we budget pretty conservatively, and we try not to see ourselves encounter a situation where we've overestimated the revenue. So our revenue estimates tend to be fairly conservative. We weren't conservative enough on the property tax estimate this year, but I wouldn't, given the strong trade-off on the service level enhancements on the fire department and the delta between the 200 or even a little bit more for that, the engineering division manager, for example, if that was funded as well as the fire department, I at the moment would not be concerned about the imbalance there because the delta is pretty small. What I would be concerned about, and what I think it's important to emphasize, is that the service level is greatly increased. But there's a trade-off for the organization and the community because while we would enjoy a higher level of service and response times from our fire department, as we come out of this recession, this COVID pandemic-induced recession, which we know typically takes about 3 years to fully get out of, and we're really at the beginning of year 2, still trying to understand where we're headed. The revenues should recover, and we're using some vacant positions today to help balance the budget. So it would be foreseeable for me that some of those vacant positions would need to remain vacant longer into the future until some new revenue arrives to help plug that service level impact. So we have a number of unfunded positions in a number of different departments. The trade-off is those departments will staff back slower than they otherwise would have had we not invested in 4 new employees. And this well, $369,000 is associated with 4 separate employees. So we have 2 full-time today, it would grow to 6, and that increment for the chief. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you.
And I'm seeing Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. I just had a quick question for Dr. Metz. In your budget details, did you ever clarify with Avenue the June sales tax number? It's twice what a normal June would be, and I'm wondering if there was some question there as to what caused it, and I wondered if you've heard back from them yet.
A great question. I have not heard back from them yet. I know they were anticipating about mid-September to have the data analyzed for us. So I will definitely reach back with Avenue, but they did anticipate right around this time they'd be getting it back to us.
Okay, thank you.
So some of our concerns, Councilmember Hall, is that during the COVID pandemic, retailers were allowed to postpone payment of some of their sales tax. And it's possible that some of our retailers took advantage of that program. And when the payments were due later in the year, there was a true up that occurred potentially in the month of June. It's also possible that some changes that have occurred in terms of how retailers communicate with the state on remittance of sales tax has led to more true up needs in that last month of the year because of a change in the procedure on how they report their tax. And so there are 2 potential questions that we have that we'd like to understand before we feel confident that that's going to be a recurring trend.
Thank you.
I'm seeing Vice Mayor Doring.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of questions that are somewhat unrelated. I'll just go through them in my list. So I'm curious as to what the assumptions are, what we have learned about why our TOT is so strong. Have we done some analysis there? Is it I mean, I think it may be a supply issue. Some places didn't fare well in fire. So I'm wondering if that's part of it, or if you can add more to that analysis. It is surprising to me in a certain way, but I'd like to hear more about what the staff thinks.
April, do you want to begin on that? And then maybe I can close on that.
Sure. One of the biggest differences between last year and this year is the reopening of Los Alcabas, which is now a Lila Hotel. They actually they remained closed because Los Alcabas sold. They remained closed because they did a lot of tenant upgrades. And I believe they opened up, it was mid-March or early April. And so they now have a higher room rate than that they did before. And they are actually providing us with their forecast, which we didn't have before under the Los Alcabas model. So we've been able to project out for them. And when we looked at them as well as Harvest Inn as well and some of our other hotels, when we're looking at what we thought we would collect during June, July, and August, and what we're actually collecting, we're seeing an upward trend on it. So it's exciting to see. And so that's why that was one of the justifications where we felt pretty comfortable raising it by at least that $200,000.
I think there is a question, Vice Mayor Doring, about the sustainability of the performance. The rack rates on these hotels are very high. Yountville is reporting similarly increased revenue that in the month of, I believe, July was $200,000 higher than their best month ever. So just incredible performance. The question is, how much of that was associated with euphoria coming out of COVID, shutdown that led to people wanting to travel, and maybe even restrictions on or challenges with international travel, and people turning to domestic opportunities like Napa Valley for the entire country. So, and I think your reference to the fires and the impacts of the fires is also possibly an explanation because there are fewer luxury rooms in the valley, and particularly near St. Helena. So there may be a bit of an artificial bump associated with that. We're confident with the estimate, and we haven't grown the estimate that much, just a couple $100,000 on the aggregate revenue for the year. And by mid-year, by January, we'll have improved. When we typically come back to you at mid-year, we would provide you an update on numbers. We still will commit, we will obviously plan on bringing you back updated numbers at mid-year. And we're hopeful that the performance will continue to improve. But we feel confident that in the $200,000 additional forecast.
This may be directed to Chief Sorensen. I don't know. I'll start with you, Mark. I'm curious as to how we provide for coverage when some of our firefighters are on strike teams. I'm concerned because we're a small city and we have low capacity, and not having one person makes a big difference. One person could, put out a fire that could, wipe out our whole community. I know that it's an incentive. I think it's built in. Our folks like to go on the strike teams to get the training, but I'm also concerned about what our current coverage is and then how it would change for those folks if our full-time professional firefighters are allowed to go on strike teams. I don't know if they are. Maybe you can talk me through that issue, Chief Sorensen.
And John, if I could comment a little bit on that too. The chief and I had a recent conversation because we had an engine and firefighters out on the Caldor fire, and the state of California issued another call for firefighters and engines when South Lake Tahoe looked like it was in that zone. And we had a conversation about our ability to respond and be prepared for an incident locally. And every time there's a call from the state for that request, the chief and I talk about our resources and our available assets, people and engines. And we decided at that time, a couple of weeks ago, that we could not commit an additional engine at that time. But I'll let the chief talk to you about the specific considerations, and also great question about what would happen in the environment of a 24/7 model.
Thank you.
So A, B, and C shift is on 48 hours, then off 96. So let's just say on 2 days, off 4. So what happens is that A shift is on and they get the call to go to, let's say, the Caldor, and they're gone. Then B shift would come in and staff the station. So instead of being on 2 and off 4, B and C would come on 2 days, off for 2, back on for 2. That overtime is reimbursed 100% by the state. It's all, they pay us time and a half from the minute that engine leaves to the minute it gets back. So when those firefighters were normally scheduled to be on shift here at the station, but they're at Caldor, that's regular time for them. But so it's overtime for who's back here. So it's covered. The most important thing is we have the 18 part-time firefighters that we still want to retain. Very important, very important. If you had the glass fire incident, we had every piece of apparatus, everything that could pump was staffed, and that's very important to keep. And all the other paid departments don't have as much depth that we have, and that's one of the main things. And that is your backup plan, where some departments, they only have 18 people on, six people on every day, and they have a total of 18 members, and that's it. They only have B and C shift to fall back if A goes out. So we're very fortunate. Did that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. I have other questions, but I'll defer to other council members. They're not as important as this one is. So thank you.
Is there, are there any other council comments or input at this point? And then I have a question for the city manager if there are no other hands here. Seeing none at this point, in terms of organizing this conversation, Mr. Prestwich, you had suggested a worksheet that would be put up that we could work through. My thought is that might help us organize our priorities from each council member and see where we've got the consensus on the issues. Is now the time to bring that forward? Or would you recommend going to public comment first?
I think it may be helpful to receive public comment first. We can show you what that looks like. Director Metz will share her screen and we can show you what we're tracking. We'll zoom in on that so everyone can see it. But we've essentially, and let me add to this conversation and provided some additional context. What we see in this chart does not include the additional positions that are unfunded that are noted and referenced in the staff report. So if there is a position, the concern we have is on the ongoing side, too heavy on the ongoing side as opposed to the one-time side. So while those positions are not listed here with the exception of the Public Works Engineering Division Manager, we have added the cost of the fire department in here as a line item. We've added the Engineering Division position as an item, as a potential starting point. These are examples, so we can erase these numbers here to just show you what it would look like. But please know that those unfunded positions in the budget now, we can also have a conversation about adding those back as well. And I had hoped that the revenue would be even stronger so that we could have more conversation about restoring some services.
Okay. So with that, and I'm seeing how this is laid out here, and in the yellow are the recommendations from you and staff in terms of what we just went over earlier.
Correct.
Okay, very good. So with that, I'm going to open it to public comment now, see if we have any input from the public, and then we'll move back to this.
There is no public comment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll bring it back to council. And shall we set our worksheet up and begin a conversation? I'm seeing Councilmember Chateau.
Thank you. I just wanted to add one more in there that would be a one-time expense for all of the employees if we wanted to give something considering what everybody's been through with the cost of living increase. And we had heard that would be about $154,000. So I'd like to add that if there's support for that as a line item to consider as we discuss this.
You certainly would, and as we discussed, then staff could come back with a breakdown of how that might work. So I'd certainly be supportive of that. I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. I think that is, just so that everyone understands, we're not talking about a cost of living adjustment to salary, but rather a one-time distribution more akin to a bonus, I believe, is the concept that is captured there.
That is correct. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
And Mark, just to confirm or April, the 154, that's included, that's the federal COVID excess, and that's included in these numbers here.
Yes, the 154 would be equivalent to the unanticipated extra funding that came this year in this year's budget associated with the COVID relief from the federal government.
Right.
And it's part of the $1.3 million in column D.
Okay, thank you.
It's part of what makes up the 1.3 million.
Okay, I wanted to comment also that I think it's smart to overemphasize one-time items here instead of reoccurring. Obviously, a couple of them sound like they need to be if we're going to agree to do it, and certainly the fire department would entirely be.
I guess I should also mention that, just so the people watching understand, the last time that any employee received an increase to the base salary, it was a 2% increase on January 1, 2020. So that was about 20 months ago, just for context. And thank you.
Thank you. I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy, and then I have a comment here.
Thank you. I just want to express my support for adding the fire department additional staffing. That's obviously a reoccurring expense. And with that, I'd like to share the observation that we've had an extraordinarily long run with this transition from entirely volunteer to pay per call to the hybrid model. The dedication and commitment of the volunteers and as paid staff have been added, the paid staff has been nothing less than phenomenal, and over the last 25 years has saved us an enormous amount of money in comparison with similarly situated communities that made the transition of full-time paid department much sooner. So while obviously in terms of timing and the recession-related budget cuts that we're still living with because our revenues are not yet back to normal, the timing is not ideal, but I think it's something we need to do. And I really can't say enough about how much the fire department has done for us. Thank you.
Thank you. My comment here at this point in terms of organizing the conversation is looking at first at these items, the staff recommendations, and just looking for council support. If these are items that we can all support, and then moving forward, and I would say looking at the fire department as the next step here, if we all agree on the staff recommendations first, what is the thought on that?
Yes.
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 Okay, so if we, unless I see any, I'm sorry, I can't, I've got to scroll down a little differently here. I'm not seeing any other. So if we support that and the staff recommendations, and then we move into the fire department conversation, as Councilmember Hardy put forward, certainly I too am in support. I believe that we need to look at making a move in terms of stability. And this is a recommendation that I think a tremendous amount of thought has gone into. I also believe that the kind of stability this will bring can also help us sort of project out into further dialogues with the county, how we do our mutual aid with the county in looking at the risks and the work that goes on in our mutual aid aspects, so that we're, in a sense, if we're playing zone defense and covering our zone here, but we're also, interfacing and in communication and in mutual aid with the county and the other agencies. I just see this as an opportunity to really build something very, very solid. So I'm certainly in support of moving forward this recommendation on the fire department as well, and want to see other council comments on this aspect.
Mayor, are we on track time-wise? I think we can all go on and on and on about these things. I just want to be more precise in our commentary so we can move past this.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any there. I think we have consensus on most of these, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
I think we do, Paul. I mean, the total here is just under the 1.3 mark, I believe. It leaves us with 60 grand or something, which we can just leave in the general fund if we want.
Okay, so if there's a feeling of consensus on these items, absolutely, I believe in moving forward. I just wanted to suss out and make sure that that's where we were.
And I just want to see if there is some left over. I do want to know that amount really quick to look over this list.
60 grand.
Actually, so I'm looking at the one time. So here we have what we're recommending for one time of 1.3 million and reoccurring of 200,000. So that's a total of 1.5 million that's over here that would bring you down to the 35% reserve for fiscal year 22. This is a total allocated so far. If it sounds like we had consensus on the one-time bonus for employees.
Right.
So we spent 769,000. with a leftover of 531,000. And then here you have your reoccurring, which is 469,000. So it's actually a deficit. But if you take the difference between the 1.5 million and the 1.2, you actually have about 300, so 261,000, potentially based on staff recommendation before, for the one-time expenses.
The other consideration, just for context, I do think we should have and we, just from a time clock standpoint, we allocated another 17 minutes for this conversation, but it would be helpful to receive some feedback on other items here that the council might be interested in investing in. The challenge and the additional consideration is the current year budget is structurally imbalanced to the tune of $575,000. So we're going to need to grow our sales revenue of at least $575,000 to be positioned better for next year. And we have to be cautious on that front, partly because of potential changes associated with the discount rate that might cost the city more money next fiscal year if that discount rate changes. And then in addition to that, our employee contracts end in June of 2022. And because of that gap in time between our last adjustment for our staff and the time at which the new contracts would begin, we will have seen 2 years pass. And we know that there has been some increasing costs associated with inflation, et cetera. And it may explain why we're having some challenges with recruiting employees to fill some of the vacant positions that we have today under recruitment.
I have a suggestion here in terms of moving forward. If we concur on the staff recommendations, we concur on the fire department and the one-time bonuses, then that leaves some money and some other choices. Is there an ability for us to sort of separately, between now and the next meeting, each put our priorities on what those additional expenditures might be, and that way we wouldn't get into a full dialogue tonight on the other issues, but we do agree on the staff recommendations, the fire department, and the one-time bonuses. Any thought there from the council, if that's a good way to move forward? And then over the next 2 weeks between the next meeting, we can each identify what we would prioritize and maybe come to consensus at the next meeting on the other items. Any thought from council?
Sorry, my general thought is, I thought that's what this list was. We've done that a couple of times. So this is the list. I'm sure that if we go away and take 2 weeks, we'll come up with a whole additional new list on top of all of our other lists. I mean, what's odd about this whole conversation is we're basically pushing pennies around relative to the infrastructure demands that we have still to address. It's another $150 million on top of this. So, my vote would be, we asked Mr. Rincon, what would he do with this $262,000? That's how I view it.
That's a good question.
Gosh,
Steve.
I have the same question.
we could probably squeeze in a little bit more paving, but not much.
That's what I was thinking, paving, because of that, 200,000 there. It's close.
Oak and Adam Street.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So do we concur on that? If that 200,000 would benefit in our paving? Is there, okay,
Yeah, sounds good.
So that leaves 61,792, is that correct? And is there something in our business recovery? I look at those parklets and think there may be something of great value there. Any other thoughts?
Parklets work for me.
Same here.
Okay, that goes a little over our budget, but Mr. Presswich, can we figure something out to make that work?
Sure, we'll value engineer those. And in terms of the street issue, what I'd like to do is work with our city engineer, public works director, to discuss a prioritization of how to invest that, because the challenge with streets is our dollars can be stretched further by maintaining the streets that we have before they fall off a cliff. And once they've fallen off a cliff, they're much more expensive to invest in. Typically, you delay repairs. I know it's frustrating, but typically you would delay a repair on a street that needs more of a rebuild. So what I'd like to do is work with our director to bring you back a list of some projects that would extend the life of other streets and try to get a lot of bang for the buck for that 200.
Are you saying, Mr. Presswich, that in this case, the bad is the enemy of the good?
We have talked about some areas today, Oak Street, College, certainly some areas that really deserve looking at. So I think that's a good way to move forward. And I'm looking at Councilmember Chateau.
Yes, I was just going to bring up the awareness of also thinking about streets in terms of the bike and pedestrian friendly projects when we look at the overall streets, and if there's anything that could be quick and flexible on the project list.
Yeah, I would support that as well. Certainly those crossings, the safe routes, if there's some opportunity there.
There are some recommendations with costs associated with them that are coming out of that crossing study. Yes.
And Mr. Presswich, I would just add one other comment with respect to your comments about maintenance and versus total rebuilds. I do think there's certain areas of town that could raise liability issues too that we need to look at in terms of trip and falls and those kinds of things. So I would be cognizant of that. The other thing in terms of the enhanced security scans, it would be good if I don't have an idea about the cost of it, but it would be good not only to do the advanced security scans, but to have an independent party do a penetration test. You don't want your own consultant doing the penetration test to see if they can get into our system. Someone else should do that. So we should look into the cost of that because we can do all the scans we want, but if we're not able to, block those penetrations. So what companies do is a penetration test, and our government should be doing that too, to make sure that we have everything in place to withstand a hack, as you say. Thanks.
Okay, so I think we're there. I think we've got what we need. Mr. Presswich, you have direction here?
Yes, thank you very much. And I also want to acknowledge the incredible cost-effective fire department operation that we've had for decades. And they really continue to contribute. They do independent fundraising. They've been very generous with their fundraising resources, and my hat's off to an excellent operation.
Thank you. And yeah, thank you to the fire department, staff, council for this focused discussion. Very much appreciated. I'm seeing a hand up from Ms. Creedon.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button.
Okay, very good. So with that, we're going to wrap up that item, and thank you again very much for the presentation. And I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Yeah, I was just going to request at the first opportunity a very short break. I just need 2 minutes to grab a glass of water, but that would be much appreciated.
Okay, we'll do that right now, and we'll get into our final items. We'll be back on at 8:10, so we'll give you 4 minutes.
Come on, let's go.
Okay, looks like we're all back in order here. So we'll get started again. And we've got two final items. And we're going to begin with item 11.2, and this is consideration and adoption of an urgency ordinance amending chapter 13.04 of the municipal code to establish a permitting system for groundwater exports during water emergencies. And this is Mr. Walsh, our city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll try to keep my presentation relatively brief as the materials covered in the staff report. But essentially, this stems from conversations that the city council has had previously related to our current water emergency and the shortages that we're suffering with our water system and in the basin generally. There was concerns raised stemming from complaints that city staff and some council members had received that individuals within the city were trucking water from private wells and transporting it elsewhere outside of the city, and that this could potentially have an impact on our groundwater resources generally. And given the significant sacrifices that we're asking the community to make in light of the current water emergency, we felt that it was incumbent on the city to do everything that we can to preserve those water resources. And so one thing that council directed my office to do is go back and look at potential means that we could implement in order to protect our water resources and hopefully prevent this type of activity should it have detrimental effect on water resources within the groundwater basin. So I discussed it with water attorneys that work in my office that specialize in this area, and we came up with a structure for an ordinance, an urgency ordinance that we believe will help to address this potential problem. And the way that's structured essentially is that when we're in a phase 2 or phase 3 water emergency, no one would be permitted to export water from their premises, from outside of their parcel, unless they were to receive a permit from the city. So it wouldn't be an out and out prohibition, but it would require a permit in order to do so. And in order to receive a permit, which would be distributed at the staff level by the public works director with the ability to appeal to the city council, the applicant would have to provide evidence to the satisfaction of the public works director that the proposed exportation of water would not have a detrimental effect on groundwater resources generally. And there's a series of specific findings that are listed in the ordinance that have to be made in order to issue that permit that we think would sufficiently protect the city and protect water resources both for the city and adjoining landowners who are also relying on groundwater. So this is the proposed structure that we come up with for this ordinance as a means to address the issue that was raised previously. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council has on the proposed ordinance. And as is noted in the staff report, this is structured as an urgency ordinance, given the fact that we're in a current water emergency and really every day counts. We felt that it was appropriate to get this implemented as soon as possible. So as an urgency ordinance, it's required to pass by a 4/5 vote in order to go into effect. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any initial council questions or input? I have a question in terms of what this does when somebody comes in for a permit. If somebody's pulling water from the aquifer and trucking it out and perhaps selling it, making a profit off of it, is that something that we can control if we have a permit process? Is that a question we can ask? Where's the water going and how is it being managed once it leaves?
That would not be a question that we would ask through this process. The fundamental question from this process is if they're exporting water at the levels that they want to, will it have a detrimental effect on our water resources, the resources of the community, and you know, both the customers of the city and adjoining landowners, and the criteria that they would have to meet in order to demonstrate that is the case. It would be, the burden would be on the applicant to provide us evidence that they are not causing that, you know, causing any detrimental effect, and they're pretty high standards that they have to meet. And if they do, then, you know, I don't think we're as concerned about what they actually do with water coming out of their private well. It's really, is their water usage going to have an effect on us and our customers and the other adjoining landowners? That's really what we're seeking to protect with this. So no, that would not be a question we would ask, but the reasons why are, you know, that I just explained are why we are not asking that question specifically.
Okay, thank you. Any other council questions? I'm saying Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you. It's more of a comment or observation than a question, I think. But you know, I've reviewed the findings required for approval, and you know, everything Mr. Walsh has said makes sense to me, but I think, you know, once any significant number of applications come in, assuming that they will and that they do, absent some defined criteria or other submittal requirements, I think it's potentially challenging for our staff to evaluate the quality of the submittal with respect to, maybe I can put it better. It could be hard for our staff to evaluate the quality of the evidence they've received in support of the application. I say this having been reviewing water availability analyses required by Napa County for a decade or more, and over the years, the criteria that the county's required for the submittals has evolved. Today, the kind of report that's required depends in part on the location of the well. And just as an example, one of the properties that we've been concerned with in terms of water export has a winery use permit. And the winery use permit set a maximum value for groundwater use. But that value was based not on the actual irrigation requirements of the vineyard. It was based on a rule of thumb that was borrowed from the county's water availability analysis standards at an acre foot per acre of vineyard, which is, or an acre foot per acre of land, which was a value initially set as an estimate of recharge on the valley floor based on an average annual rainfall of 36 inches, with the concept being that a third of the rainfall would actually go into recharging the aquifer, and you'd get thus an acre foot per acre. Well, a lot of these fairly simplistic standards have come under increasing scrutiny. So, you know, how we define the requirements for that submittal really do ultimately determine what staff has to work with and what kind of determinations they're going to make. Because unless we spend the money on an in-house geological resource capability, then we're really dependent on undefined criteria for the submittal. So it's really just an observation that there's more work to be done ultimately to make implementation of this ordinance effective. I support the ordinance as drafted, absolutely, and I don't wish to defer it. I just want to make sure everyone understands that there is still more to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm seeing Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. I was just, the practical aspects of this make it, I support it. I just don't know how we'll enforce any of it or police it, if you will. I was just thinking maybe something in addition we could do is look at trying to harden our current hydrants and water tanks if they're not secured. And I wondered if perhaps Chief Sorensen, you have any thoughts there or any discussion internally in your group on how we might be able to do that?
Just a point of order there. I think that's on a separate agenda item, Eric.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
so.
That's our next item in terms of the water theft. This is regarding the pumping.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Doring. Councilmember Hall, any further thoughts here on where we are on this one?
No.
Okay. I'm seeing Vice Mayor Doring.
Well, it dawns on me that the criteria we've set out for applicants is criteria that may be applicable against the city at some point. And I want to get into a lot of detail there, but I'm concerned. I do think it's going to be difficult to actually present the evidence that's required here. And I am concerned about this criteria being used in a different way than we intended it to be used. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you. Any other council comment before I open it for public comment? And I'm seeing none. I'll look to our city clerk.
No public comment.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the council. And so if we look at this as in a sense, maybe perhaps a stepping stone, that by implementing this, it gives us a foundation to work off of. And then we can look a little more deeply as a next step at the criteria and, look at some of the concerns brought up by the vice mayor in terms of how that criteria may be used differently than we expect. Does that sound like a reasonable way to move forward? I'm seeing Mr. Presswich.
Before answering that question, I want to also bring forward an idea that if there was a discussion about the potential challenge of the staff having either the time or the expertise at reviewing some of these applications, it is possible for us, I believe, and the city attorney can provide some feedback on that, to set up some form of a fee structure that would require the applicant to pay for that analysis. And the analysis could be completed by a qualified independent, professional that would render a recommendation.
Yeah, I think that sounds like an appropriate way to go. With that, are there any comments from the city attorney? Any additional comments before we put this forward and see if there's a motion?
No, other than just to respond to what Mark was saying, which is, yes, that was what I contemplated, is that there would be a fee that would be used to pay for staff and likely consultant time to review any application submittals. Although I agree that all the comments made are well taken and things that we need to think about in terms of implementation.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'll entertain a motion. My understanding with this urgency ordinance is it needs the 4/5 to pass.
Correct.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the urgency ordinance.
And I'm seeing Presswich.
It would be helpful to include in that motion, if there's interest in the staff developing a fee structure before, so this wouldn't, while it's effective, the motion could include direction to establish a fee structure intended to pursue full cost recovery on the independent analysis and to not issue a permit until the fee structure is adopted by the council subsequently.
I would include all of that in my motion.
And is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
And a roll call, please.
And just
Oh,
Just
Seth,
for clarification, Councilmember Chateau, I just wanted to make sure that you are adopting the urgency ordinance by title only and waiving further reading.
I am, thank you.
Are you in agreement, Councilmember Hardy?
Ma'am, thank you.
Okay. Shall I do roll call?
Yes, please.
Councilmember Chateau.
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. So we'll move forward now. Thank you for the focus on that item, and thank you, Mr. Walsh, for the work on that. And we'll now move to item 12.1, and this is consideration of adoption of an urgency ordinance amending Chapter 13.04 of the Municipal Code to establish water theft regulations, administrative penalties, and enforcement procedures. And this is also Mr. Walsh, our city attorney.
Thank you. This came up in essentially the same context. It was not discussed at a previous meeting, but it stemmed out of conversations that City Manager Prestwich and I had related to what we need to do to protect our water system. I believe that Councilmember Hall raised the issue with him, and I noted that our existing municipal code doesn't have any language in it that explicitly prohibited water theft, and that is either stealing water essentially from city hydrants or hooking up illegal connections to the city's water system. And a number of the communities that we represent have adopted ordinances that explicitly make water theft and a misdemeanor and provide for other enforcement mechanisms in order to just protect against that. As Councilmember Hall noted earlier, it's something that's difficult to monitor, but in the event that we find that people are actually stealing water from the city, we want to have language in our code that specifically addresses that, so it will be easier to prosecute that type of action. And it presents a more significant concern now than possibly it had in the past, just because, as the reason we mentioned, currently in the water emergency, where we have a kind of an incumbent duty to protect our water system. And given that people and businesses in St. Helena, as well as surrounding communities, are currently stuck with water rationing, it kind of increases the incentives for people to actually go out and try to obtain water through illicit means. So we developed this ordinance to address that issue in our municipal code. We've also structured this as an urgency ordinance in light of the current water emergency and the need to address these issues quickly. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And I'll go right to Councilmember Hall if he had some thoughts he wanted to put out there on this item.
Thank you. I think this is a great step one. I guess step two in my mind is literally physically figuring out some way to, do an inventory of our water assets and make sure that they're all secured. That was my comment.
Thank you. And that's, as we work on this water security framework, all that fits in there. So I think that is necessary work, and these are steps along that way. Any other council comment? I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you. I have a question for the city attorney. I'm looking at the section, that's 13.04.410. Down at the end of this section, administrative penalties are defined. Do these amounts are they dictated by state law for this category of offense, or do we have as a council some discretion in how we set them?
I believe you have some discretion on how you set them, although we do have administrative penalties. I think we have limitations set elsewhere in our municipal code.
I ask simply because, and you know, it may be as much an emotional response to the whole idea of folks stealing a truckload of water during our water emergency, but somehow $500 for an initial violation of water theft on that scale seems light. And I just not sure, you know, I know that it's typical for codes and involving misdemeanors to follow a kind of predetermined schedule for penalties, but I'm just wondering how much latitude we have. Thank you.
So just to clarify one thing, this would be an alternative remedy if it were not pursued as a misdemeanor. So these would be administrative penalties, which is a more streamlined process, but it is that would be an alternative means.
Okay, so it's an either or. We don't get two bites at that apple.
Right.
Thank you.
Are there additional council comments? With that, then I will look to public comment and see if our city clerk is seeing any public comment.
No public comment.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the council. And one thing I'll just mention, sort of related to Councilmember Hardy's comments, you know, water, as we get less of it, we start to recognize the true value of it. And in challenging times, decisions get made or can be made in a more desperate way. The value of water, it is the source of everything we do and are. So those fines, how they are laid out, I do think have to be somehow commensurate with the situation. And I don't. So I'll just check with Ethan here. The idea is, if somebody's taking water and paying a fine that is less than what that water can bring them, can they factor that into the cost of what they're doing? And so I just want to touch base with Ethan here and see if this gives a sort of a protection of that.
Right. Sure, that's a fair point. I'm looking right now to see. I thought that the administrative penalties that you could charge are set forth in your municipal code, but I'm not finding that right away. I guess the point I would make is that you can, you know, prosecute this criminally, which is more significant.
Okay.
In terms of what you can do.
Okay. Because I do think that has to be factored in at some point when somebody's making a business decision. Is the fine just part of doing business? So if this ordinance gives us a step, I certainly am in favor of moving forward with it. And then if there's ways that we can make sure we address those issues. Are we there on the council in terms of support with a motion?
I'll move approval of the adoption of the ordinance with magic language to be filled in by our city clerk if necessary.
I'll second it.
And a roll call.
Is that title only, waive the reading? Is that what you need?
Yes, I'm sure you included that in your motion to adopt by title only and waive further reading.
That's part of my motion. Thank you.
All right, roll call would be Vice Mayor Dory,
Yes.
Councilmember Hall,
Yes.
Chateau,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. Very good. Well, that is our final item. Want to thank everybody for the focus and the continued work in the community, and we'll keep conserving water. We'll keep being ready for any potential emergencies. And we really appreciate all the hard work, and we'll see you at the next meeting.
Good meeting, council and staff. Good work, staff.
Thank you, everyone.